Hi, I'm Steve Breen. Welcome to this edition of Prosperion. Perspective. I'm a big believer in perspective. I believe the right perspective influences how we interpret the world and is key to the opportunities that are around us. These past few weeks, we've been sharing perspective on investor behavior and being a successful investor. I believe the right perspective is paramount. There are really two things to remember. First, we live in a world that is filled with constant noise, and very little of it is positive. And second, the United States is a very small part of the world. So perspective can get derailed, like it did in 2012. This was a year of confusion and chaos, from the polarity of the election to the US and European debt crisis, to the fiscal cliff, to the debt ceiling. The list goes on and on and on. Did you hear the one about the shadow of the Dow 14,000? What? Is this some kind of financial Groundhog Day predicting the direction of the market? Remember, it was the Mayan calendar that said the world was going to end in 2012? It didn't. So when investors allow themselves to get influenced by what I would call moronic statements like these, they constantly are jumping in and out of the market, usually at the wrong time. It only pulls them off track, distracting them from their ultimate financial goals. I believe 2013 will be a year of much greater clarity. We now know who the president's going to be for the next 4 years. We know what tax policy is going to look like. We have a much better understanding of our economic environment, and we even have clarity about consumers, both domestic and abroad. Now, let's look beyond the United States and see really where there's some exciting opportunities. A simple yet meaningful example is Starbucks, in all places, Vietnam. The demographics of Ho Chi Minh City are rather straightforward. You have 90 million people, 60 million are under the age of 35. They notoriously love Western brands, from Louis Vuitton handbags, traveling in BMW and Mercedes S-classes. And remember, this is a communist country. Didn't we just fight a war there a few decades ago? Well, in the past few years, Western companies such as Burger King, Carl's Jr., Subway have been making huge inroads into that country. Domino's has 14 locations in Ho Chi Minh City alone. The flagship Starbucks store will hold 150 customers. They anticipate 700 customers a day and expect to generate over $800,000 a year in revenues. That exceeds some of the best locations here. In other developing countries, children are living lives their parents never dreamed of. Consider Peru. They're buying washing machines, flying in airplanes, calling on smartphones. Millions of people are moving up the economic ladder toward a lifestyle considered impossible not long ago. We don't believe this is a temporary trend nor a short-term phenomenon. Rather, it's a full-blown cycle. We call this the rise of the global consumer. You know, it's anticipated that consumers are growing at a 350 million rate every 5 years. Consider that number. That's more than one United States total population moving into the consumer class every 5 years. Another interesting illustration is from the book, The New Global Middle Class. The chart you see shows the wave of consumer consumption of the middle class in the developing world. Often we think of this move in consumers, we focus on China and India, the most heavily populated countries. But if you just look south of the border, consumer growth in Mexico, Brazil, and Chile is growing rapidly. Just look at consumer spending as illustrated here. The last 20 years, the growth of the consumer has been explosive. Now consider this next chart of the world's top luxury brands and how they've rushed into China to establish their presence. The chart shows the total number of retail stores and the variety of brands, the top 10 brands, and you recognize many of them. And you know, one final example is to just look at air traffic around the world on YouTube. Go and take a look at that. It's a beautiful demonstration of large aircraft traffic around the world in a 24-hour period. This is an incredible example of progress and innovation in our world today, and it goes on every day. I can't imagine anyone who sees that video and is pessimistic about the future. A good perspective is vital to being a successful investor. And sometimes it's important to take a step back and remember the United States accounts for 5% of the total population of our world. The right perspective can completely change how we view the future, the markets, and our world. Thank you for being a client of Prosperion Financial Advisors.